innovation is on everybody's agenda, and we're always speaking about increasing the research either for sustainability goals or for combating COVID or for eternal world economy growth in the whole global scale. We always boil down to research, and I was willing to share some experience on a project that is going on the Brix scale that might somehow form the potential for how future research will be done. So a couple of words about my university first, in order to make some short introduction. So the RUDN, or People's Friendship University, is quite a large and popular university in Russia, and as my colleague here probably has already announced, there's a lot of things going on. 30,000 students, over 30% of them are foreign, from all over the world, and I mean all over the world, like 150 countries. But what is also very important for us, especially in spite of the topic that I'll be representing today, is that RUDN University is managing the Brics Network University. So together with at least one of the sections, because Brics Network University is a large organization with many tracks, which are named international thematic groups. And there are 7 of them. It's like ecology, computer and digital science, and Brics studies. And one of these groups is International Thematical Group in Economics. And RUDN is happening to manage it together with another big university in Russia, the Higher School of Economics. And Brics has been going into a large research enhancing project over the last, I would say, couple of years. But first of all, I just want to highlight what is the structure of the network university. Now, the issue is that this is just a reminder, so that we would speak on the same ground here. The network university is basically a joint agreement. Like, we are all university professors and people that are engaged in education. We all know that universities are predominantly working on the scale of bilateral agreements. And usually a bilateral agreement has everything that is connected to a usual, like, university exchange. Like, we agree on how we will exchange students, we agree on how we will exchange professors, we agree on joint research, and then we sign a bilateral agreement. Every university has dozens and dozens of these agreements, but sometimes the amount of operations between 2 universities are becoming too high, and there's becoming a need for just one agreement, except for 15,000 different bilateral agreements. And this is the core idea of any network university. Now, sorry for the design. I mean, design has never been my great part, So, but hopefully you can cope with this incredible piece of modern art that I have created here. So basically, the Brics Network University is no different, and it is serving as a means for cooperation of many universities that are sort of scattered around Brics nations. And currently there's over 15 universities operating in one ITG alone, economics alone, and all other segments of Brics Network University are also consisting of huge amount of entities. So like any bilateral agreement, the Brics Network University is also very, very much concerned about promoting and fostering the research among the members. But whenever you start actually fostering research among the networks, it all boils down to just bilateral things. So it didn't really help the network nature of the university itself and the position of BRICS nations as it is. So, and it's suffice to say that BRICS countries, like would it be Russia or India or Brazil or China and South Africa, are spending more and more efforts and money into research. And I've composed a small table here, tried to color it out so that you can see the patterns. The research that has been, it certainly isn't the best time for spending on research, apart from medical and biotech, of course. But you can see that actually the amounts of internal research costs that are being done in BRICS countries is gradually rising everywhere, especially if you look at China over here. They're showing, I would say, exponential growth. So if we look at the proportion of GDP lower on, you will see that the research is going on pretty fast, and it's quite a large amount of the product that is being produced in all countries. So, and if we even look at the number of researchers in a so-called full-time equivalent, we can see that these numbers are also, well, at least they're only in Russia, they're slightly decreasing, but everywhere else it's slightly increasing. However, there's also more data to show that BRICS is more or less, BRICS countries are more and more investing into research. This pattern has been around for quite a long time. Obviously, recently with the pandemic situation, countries have greatly increased the funding of medical and biotech in general, as well as telecom, which is also turned out to be quite important, as we can currently see. However, there's a different pattern in every country of how the research is being done. Like on the right here, you can see the sources of inputs for research. And by inputs here, I predominantly mean money, so investments, but also, let's say, administrative inputs, like governmental inputs. They're not only funding, but also administrative, let's say, taxation relief. That would be a governmental input as well. And you can see that the structure of the inputs into research is slightly different in all BRICS countries. While Russia and Brazil are similar, China is having much more inputs on the side of business. Well, of course, we all know that large business in every country cannot survive without the government. So any large business in any large country is only technically independent. But the good side is that the even large business that is connected to the government is much more flexible and much more aware of the trends that are happening in the business and in research. And therefore, usually it is considered that the business inputs into research is more productive and more effective in the end, although it is very difficult to measure the effectiveness of innovation anywhere. So every country is understanding the importance of research. I mean, every country in Brics and around the world. And therefore, every country has its own version of governmental strategy that will foster and push the digital transformation, that's another popular term today, into the bright future. As you see, every country has its predominant strategy. Actually, there are many strategies of digital transformation in each Brics country. But I just took the most popular ones, let's say. So in Russia, we have this digital economy, like the development of artificial intelligence. Pretty much the same artificial intelligence can be seen in China. The Make in India strategy, which is Digital India. The South African Electronic Communications Act, which, by the way, if you read inside this strategy, it's basically also rotating around artificial intelligence in that way or another. And the Brazilian digital strategy, which is also rotating around digitalization of government and the economy. And all these strategies imply that there will be more and more joint research done by Brics nations, together or separately, doesn't matter, but the focus is going that way. And so is the education focus, by the way. Now, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, the research and of the most important topics listed today became too complex to research them alone. Yes, maybe countries like China, huge economies, one of the two greatest economies in the world, can just take the whole rainbow of most promising research topics and invest equally into each of them. But the remaining countries, Brazil, India, Russia, South Africa, we cannot handle it all alone. Even US cannot handle all the topics by themselves. The science today has become too complex. It needs more and more talents. It needs more and more students, and it needs more and more venture capital, and it needs more and more markets for the results of the research. So, and by the way, it frequently needs more and more infrastructure, like laboratories or equipment or consumables. So the innovation today and the research of these innovative technologies has become too complex to handle alone. And I've looked through the strategies, and I can say that these are the most popular technologies that are being mentioned, at least in the papers that I've seen over the last year, which can be of interest for all the Brics nations. And some of them are more interesting for several Brics nations rather than everyone. Others are important for everyone, like internet technologies you can see here are important for everyone, which is logical. I mean, looking at the previous slide where artificial intelligence is pretty much the governmental strategy of all Brics nations, of course, internet technologies and telecom is becoming important. Nuclear energy suddenly becomes very important in spite of all great ideas about green energy and renewables. Nuclear seems to be pretty much the only reliable and large source of energy in the nearest 15 years, apart from traditional sources. So this is a technology that is interesting for over 50% of BRICS nations. Space technologies, supply chain technologies, and of course, our all-time favorite, biotech. So these topics that I've listed here are all rather complex. They're too hard to develop alone. Currently, the major hub of global innovation research is concentrated in US and European Union and Japan. So, and China, by the way. So the majority of patents are inside these four names. So the point of Brix, as you probably know from the very beginning, was to somehow create not a clear alternative to the so-called Western world, but more like a forum where great leaders of developing world can actually meet and discuss matters in parallel. So without the necessity to go to some G20 or G7 or something like that. And so far it has been pretty good. Brics has launched the Brics Investment Bank, which is more or less an alternative to World Bank. And although it doesn't have great volume of operations, but the mere idea that it's there is already good. And there has an idea has appeared that the same kind of pattern should be applied to research. Since the topics that you can see here are too difficult to work on alone, then there should be some mechanism to make the research between BRICS countries easier. And this is where the problem has started, because research today is a very, very complex industry as it is. It involves a huge amount of business incubators, innovation teams, think tanks, technology transfer centers, universities and their innovation laboratories. Research infrastructure is situated around the globe, and people are taking cues to actually do something on a very sophisticated equipment base. Every country has some kind of a venture fund that supports innovation, sometimes a dozen of them. There is a governmental agency or a dozen of them that supports research. So it is a mess, really. Well, maybe mess is not the right English word, but it is something very sophisticated, let's put it this way. So the first step to actually help the BRICS countries to have a research together, to make it easier, would be to create a platform, a BRICS platform, that would be able to have the data of all these actors in innovation. And the platform would be gathering the data about the actors of innovation system, about the innovation events, whether that would be educational or business angels contest or grant announcement in BRICS countries, and also the data about potential technology transfers. So this is the way the data would probably be scattered, and on the very below, the fostering the dialogue are the goals that each data collection is going to be working. So that will be cross incubation, soft landing, capacity building, and finally fostering the dialogue. Now, there's been a lot of thinking and for a couple of years on how this platform would be working. And the best diagram that I can show you so far looks like this, which looks sophisticated enough, even design-wise. But the main idea, I think, is quite visible. So there's the innovation ecosystem in India with all the business incubators, governmental agencies, think tanks, infrastructure, and so on, universities and innovation teams inside universities. There's the ecosystem of China. There's the ecosystem of Russia and Brazil and South Africa. And all the actors will be registered in that way or another, at least those who want to participate, registered within the system. So the information types from the previous slide will be going to the Brics data center, which will be run by all 5 countries. So, and it will be accumulated there. And after that, once it's accumulated there, any innovation team in Russia can access it and then find out whether there are any teams that are doing the same thing in, let's say, Brazil, that they can cooperate with. Or maybe there's a venture funding that is available in India that they can apply to. Or there's a team that is willing to do side research on a similar topic from South Africa. So it's kind of a search engine in the end, aggregator. And this gathering of information and processing it in a certain way will help to innovators to actually not feel alone on the moon in their own countries, like they do now pretty frequently, and actually make this innovation area a single integrated research country, let's put it this way. So this is a project that has been going on for about 2 years now. It's gone pretty much far into discussion between Brics representatives. There are still many technical problems to be solved. There's even more legislation problems to be solved, as usual. Technically, it's very easy to do something, but lawyers. And we think that probably in the future, with the development of the AI that all the countries are opting for, this might be somehow the first glimpse of what the future research networks might look like on an international scale. So we'll just have to wait and see whether this will happen in our lifetime. So that's what I wanted to present to you today, and thank you for your attention.